We're in Rome. It's February 17th, 1600. The sun is coming up over the Campo de Fiori, the field of flowers. But nobody is here to buy flowers. They're here to watch a man get executed by fire. A man is being dragged to a giant wooden stake with a mountain of firewood piled around it. And to make sure he can't say one last thing, they've locked his tongue in a brutal metal gag. This is Giordano Bruno, and he is about to be burned alive. So what could this guy possibly have said that was so dangerous, so terrifying to the most powerful group on the planet that they decided to literally set him on fire? What ideas were so world-shattering that the only solution was to completely erase him? To understand why the church needed Giordano Bruno silenced, we have to look at the universe he imagined. And to do that, we have to rewind to the very edge of what people in the 16th century thought was reality. To understand how insane Bruno's ideas were, you have to see the world he was born into. Filippo Bruno was born in 1548 near Naples. He was born into a world where everything had its place, not just on earth, but in the sky. For hundreds of years, the church and basically everyone else believed what Aristotle and Ptolemy taught. The earth was the center of the entire universe. It was special, it didn't move, and it was the whole point of God's plan. The sun, moon, and stars were supposedly stuck in these perfect glass spheres that spun around us. Everything was neat and tidy. Humanity was literally at the center of God's universe. This wasn't just science, it was a sacred fact. If you questioned it, you were questioning God himself. And then came Bruno. He was super smart and incredibly curious, so at 17, he joined a Dominican convent, one of the most intellectual places in the church, and took the name Giordano. For a while, it worked out. He became a priest and was famous for his insane memory, but he couldn't be contained. He read forbidden books about philosophy and ancient magic, and he started to think that the universe they all believed in was way too small for the kind of God he imagined. He started asking questions no one was supposed to ask. He doubted the biggest beliefs in the Catholic faith. His bosses got freaked out. The church officially accused him of heresy, so in 1576, Giordano Bruno did the only thing he could do. He ran. He ditched his priest robes and started a new life as a fugitive, wanted for his ideas. For the next 15 years, he would bounce all over Europe, trying to find a single place that could handle his explosive theories. He never would. So, what were these ideas that got him kicked out of everywhere he went? Calling them ahead of their time is the biggest understatement. These were ideas that took centuries for people to accept, and honestly, they're still mind-blowing today. The main thing was, he took an already crazy idea from Copernicus, that the sun was the center of our system, not the earth, and he blew it up to infinity. Bruno said the universe wasn't some closed-off little snow globe. It was endless, infinite. Think about that. If the universe is infinite, it can't have a center. If there's no center, Earth isn't special, Rome isn't special, humanity isn't special. In Bruno's universe, our sun is just some random star. He believed every single star you see at night is another sun, just like ours, and that those suns probably had their own planets. He literally wrote, "There are innumerable suns and an infinite number of planets which circle around their suns as our 7 planets circle around our sun." Can you imagine the pure terror this caused the church? Their entire religion was based on Earth being unique. The Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, and Jesus dying to save humanity on this one planet. But if there are infinite worlds, do they have their own people? Do they have their own saviors? Bruno's ideas were about to unravel everything. The church's story of salvation wasn't the only one, it was just a local one. This was a massive threat to an institution that claimed to have the one and only way to God. But he didn't stop there. He rejected a ton of other Catholic beliefs. He had heretical views on the Trinity and whether Christ was divine. He openly mocked the belief that bread and wine literally become Christ's body and blood, calling it a teaching of asses. He was also huge into Hermeticism, a kind of mystical magic. He thought magic was a real way to connect with God, who he believed was in everything, animating the entire universe. To the Inquisition, this wasn't just heresy. It was straight up demonic. He saw God everywhere, which meant God and the universe were the same thing. and that was completely against the church's teaching of a God who was separate from his creation. With these insane ideas, Bruno became a professional exile. He went to all of Europe's biggest cities, but everywhere he went, he started fights. The guy had a talent for getting into trouble. He escaped Italy and went to Geneva, but he argued so much that the Calvinists kicked him out too. He went to France and for a little while was safe in Paris because he impressed King Henry III with his crazy memory skills, but he wore out his welcome there. So he went to England, gave lectures at Oxford, and might have even been a spy. But his aggressive style and crazy ideas caused problems. He basically attacked the professors at Oxford, calling them idiots. Then he went through Germany, fighting with Lutherans. It was the same pattern everywhere. People were fascinated at first. Then came the arguments, and then they kicked him out. Bruno wasn't a guy who would tone it down to make friends. He was a genius, but he was also arrogant, stubborn, and loved to argue. He was fighting a war on two sides. The Catholic Church thought he was a heretic, and the new Protestant churches thought his ideas were just as dangerous. He had nowhere to go, a man whose brain was too big for the world. And it was this search for someone, anyone, who would listen to him that led him right into a trap that would cost him his life. After 15 years of running, he got an invitation. In 1591, a rich guy from Venice named Giovanni Mocenigo invited Bruno to be his tutor. Mocenigo wanted to learn Bruno's famous memory tricks, thinking it was some kind of secret magic. Bruno, probably sick of being on the run, made a huge mistake and said yes. It went bad, fast. Mocenigo got mad because he couldn't understand the complex philosophy he thought he was paying for. He was also probably terrified by the insane heresies Bruno was casually telling him. On May 23, 1592, Mocenigo snitched. He wrote a letter to the Venetian Inquisition, accusing Bruno of every blasphemy imaginable. Bruno was arrested and thrown in prison. He defended himself like a pro, saying his ideas were philosophy, not religion. But the Roman Inquisition, the Vatican's headquarters, heard they had this high-profile heretic in a cell, and Rome wanted him. In February 1593, Giordano Bruno was sent to Rome and locked in the prisons of the Holy Office. He would never be free again. For 7 grueling years. They held him in a cell. The trial was designed to mentally break him. He was interrogated over and over by some of the most powerful people in the church, including Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, the same guy who would later go after Galileo. The list of charges was basically every radical thing he'd ever said. His views on Christ, his belief in infinite worlds, his use of magic, and most of all, his absolute refusal to admit he was wrong. The Inquisition didn't always want to execute people. They wanted them to repent. If he had just said, "I take it back," he would have lived, but Bruno would not break. He stood his ground. Finally, it was over. On January 20th, 1600, Pope Clement VIII declared Bruno an unrepentant heretic. When they read him his death sentence, Bruno looked his judges in the eye and delivered the most savage final line in history. "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it." It was an unbelievable final act of defiance. His fate was sealed. Bruno was handed over to the city officials. The execution was scheduled for February 17th in the Campo de' Fiori. This square wasn't just for markets. It was where the Inquisition put on its most brutal shows of power. The location was deliberately public, a terrifying warning to everyone. At dawn, he was taken from his cell to be publicly humiliated. They paraded him through the streets, and when he got to the square, they stripped him naked and tied him to the stake. To make sure he couldn't shout any last-second heresies, they used a vicious iron gag with a spike to pin down his tongue. As a final symbolic act, they held a crucifix up to his face. Bruno, defiant until the very end, turned his head away. As priests chanted, begging him to repent, the pyre was lit. The flames shot up, swallowing the man who dared to imagine an infinite universe. And to make sure that no one could ever gather his remains as relics, they collected his ashes and threw them into the Tiber River, a final desperate attempt to erase him from existence. Giordano Bruno, the philosopher of infinity, was gone. The execution of Giordano Bruno was supposed to be the end of the story. A few years later, in 1603, The church put all of his books on the index of forbidden books, and his name was supposed to be a warning. But here's the crazy part. You can't kill an idea with fire. In death, Bruno became more than a philosopher. He became a legend, a martyr for free thought. Of course, it's a little more complicated. He was executed just as much for his religious and magical beliefs as for his ideas about the universe. He wasn't a modern scientist. He was a philosopher whose ideas came from intuition. But he's a legend because his story is one of the most incredible clashes between big-time authority and intellectual freedom ever. Almost 300 years after his execution in 1889, a new Italian government built a statue of him right in the middle of the Campo dei Fiori, on the exact spot where he was burned. Today, the dark hooded statue of Giordano Bruno stares forever toward the Vatican, a silent and powerful challenge. The inscription at the bottom says, "To Bruno, from the age he divined, here where the fire burned." His story is an insane reminder of how dangerous ideas can be, and it's a testament to the courage of someone who faced the most powerful institution on earth with nothing but his own mind. If you thought this story was as crazy as I did, slam that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more stories about the rebels and thinkers who changed our world. And we want to know what you think. Who is another historical figure whose story absolutely needs to be told? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.